Hello folks, this video features a celestial navigation calculator I created using a spreadsheet which can be used in conjunction with the Nautical Almanac and Google Earth to get a position fix for a location. Now this video is as much for my benefit to be able to refer back to it in the future if need be as for anyone else's. But of course, I hope that the viewer is able to find some use for it as well. Okay, first step is to measure the altitude angle of 3 stars from a location on Earth. I'll use the planetarium program Stellarium to take these measurements. The 3 stars I have chosen to measure are Difta, Aldebaran, and Shadar. Difta in the southern sky, Aldebaran in the eastern sky, and Shadar in the northern sky. The date and time of these measurements are November the 23rd, 2024 at 3 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So if I click on Difta and reference the data given on the left of the screen, the line we are interested in is labeled AZ/ALT, which stands for azimuth, which we don't need, and the next one is altitude angle above the horizon. So now I can input Difta's altitude angle into the spreadsheet, which is 41 degrees, 9 minutes, and 30.8 seconds. The next star I'll measure is Aldebaran. So I'll click on that star and input its altitude angle into the spreadsheet, which is 49 degrees, 17 minutes, and 22.5 seconds. Okay, last star to measure is Shadar. So I'll click on that star and input its altitude angle as well, which is 59 degrees, 36 minutes, and 19.9 seconds. Now upon entering these angles into the spreadsheet, it'll calculate the co-altitude angle, which is just the measured angle subtracted from 90 degrees, and it will display the distance in nautical miles to the observation location from each star's GP, or geographical or ground position. The GP, or ground position, of a star or any celestial body is simply that location on Earth where, if you were standing there, the star would be directly above you, 90 degrees from the horizon at your zenith. If you were to hang a plumb line or a string with a weight on the end of it at the star's GP and wait for it to settle down and stop any swinging, and then you sighted directly up along that string line, it would point directly at that star. I also added an adjustment column to the spreadsheet to account for refraction by just a couple of nautical miles for those stars that are measured to have an altitude angle of less than 45 degrees, just due to the thicker atmosphere at lower angles. Any stars with a measured altitude angle of more than 45 degrees are not adjusted for in my program. So while the refraction calculations aren't super accurate, this program consistently gets me within about 15 nautical miles of the location. Okay, next step is to open the Nautical Almanac and look up the data for the date and time of the observation. This observation was made on November the 23rd, 2024. So we'll enter in our date and go get the data. Once we have the almanac opened to the correct date, we first have to look up the Greenwich hour angle of Aries, or the GHA of Aries, for the time we took the measurements. In this case, the observation was made at 3 a.m. GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time. That's 0300 Zulu if you're in the military. GMT is simply the current time on the prime meridian, which runs through Greenwich, England. Now, in case you may not be familiar with what the GHA of Aries is all about, I've created a couple of images to help describe it a little better. But before we talk about the GHA of Aries, we need to define what is meant by the first point of Aries. The first image depicts a top-down view of Earth's orbit around the Sun. And the time of year in this image is on the day of the spring equinox, or vernal equinox, for the northern hemisphere. On this day of the year, the Sun is directly over the equator and is also directly over the 0-degree longitude line of the Earth at noon, midday GMT time. The 0-degree longitude line, or the prime meridian, runs along the Earth from the North Pole to the South Pole and passes directly through the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England. So the time zone was named Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, so the day is the spring equinox and the time is 12 p.m. noon GMT. Now on that day, if you're standing on the equator and on the 0-degree longitude line at noon Greenwich Mean Time, the first point of Aries is directly behind the Sun in this image. If you drew a line extending from the center of the Earth out through the equator and extended that line on through the center of the Sun and out the other side and kept extending that line out into interstellar space, that line would intersect the first point of Aries. It's a point or location on the celestial sphere. It's called the first point of Aries because that point used to be located within the constellation of Aries-Saram, but due to Earth's axial precession, it's now located in the constellation of Pisces. It's called the first point of Aries because it is directly above the 0-degree longitude line at noon, and is also in line with the equator as well as the ecliptic plane, which is the plane in which Earth orbits around the Sun. And this alignment occurs on the day of the vernal equinox. So on this day at noon GMT, if you were standing on the equator and on the prime meridian, you would be standing at the GP of the Sun, with the Sun directly over your head, as well as also standing at the GP of the first point of Aries. The westward progression of the GHA of Aries is a consequence of Earth's rotation on its axis, as well as its yearly orbit around the Sun. Now the GHA of Aries, or the Greenwich hour angle of Aries, is simply the angle in degrees measured westward from the prime meridian, or the 0-degree longitude line, to the first point of Aries. It's called the hour angle because the angle to the first point of Aries changes by 15 degrees every hour. This is, of course, because the Earth rotates on its axis at a rate of 15 degrees per hour. So, at noon, on the day of the vernal equinox, the GHA of Aries is 0 degrees because the first point of Aries is 0 degrees west of the prime meridian. Now 1 hour later, the Earth will have rotated 15 degrees to the east. So at 1 p.m. GMT on the equinox, the GHA of Aries will be 15 degrees west of the prime meridian. At 2 p.m. GMT on the equinox, the GHA of Aries will be 30 degrees, and so on. Now the GHA of Aries is not designated east or west like longitude is, because the Earth, of course, spins in one direction throughout the day. So the GHA of Aries is just designated in degrees west of the prime meridian, from 0 through 359.99999. So, to recap then, the GHA of Aries is just the angle measured in degrees to the first point of Aries, westward from the prime meridian longitude line. Now the stars in the almanac are listed next to a column labeled SHA, or sidereal hour angle, which is just a fancy way of saying the angle measured in degrees westward from the first point of Aries to a star's location on the celestial sphere. So, referring to this image, if you were standing on the equator on the prime meridian and you could see stars in the middle of the day, and since the light from the stars arrive at the Earth in parallel rays, star X, if it too were located directly over the equator with a 0-degree latitude, would appear to be 45 degrees above your horizon due west of your location. So star X would measure to be an angle of 45 degrees west of the first point of Aries. Now, since the SHA of a star is measured in degrees west from the first point of Aries, the star would have an SHA of 45 degrees. If you were standing on the equator and also on the 45-degree west longitude line, star X would appear to be straight over your head, and you would be at star X's GP, or ground position. So the GP of star X would be logged as 45 degrees, 0 minutes west longitude, 0 degrees, 0 minutes north latitude. Now on to the second image. This image depicts the same top-down view of Earth's orbit around the Sun, only now a month and a half has gone by, and the Earth has revolved 45 degrees, or 1/8 of an orbit, further around the Sun. So now, at 12 o'clock noon, from Greenwich, England, the first point of Aries would be measured to be 45 degrees to the west of the prime meridian. Now, since the stars are so large and so far away, actually, all the light rays coming from the stars cross the entire diameter of the Earth's orbit in essentially parallel rays, which is why, even a month and a half after the vernal equinox, we have to look a full 45 degrees west of the prime meridian to see the first point of Aries. So now, a month and a half later, when measured at 12 noon from Greenwich, England, we would say that the GHA of Aries is 45 degrees. When, of course, the GHA of Aries at 12 noon on the equinox was 0 degrees. Now, it's important to remember that the GHA of Aries is always measured with respect to the prime meridian, or 0-degree longitude line. If we waited another month and a half, the Earth would be exactly to the right of the Sun in this image, and the GHA of Aries at 12 noon, as measured from Greenwich, would be 90 degrees. You'll also notice in this image that star X has moved around the equator 45 degrees further west, and its GP is now located at 90 degrees west longitude. Now, since the stars' positions remain fixed relative to the first point of Aries, star X's SHA is still the same angle west of the first point of Aries, but now, to get the longitude of its GP on Earth, we have to add the GHA of Aries, which is 45 degrees at noon from Greenwich, to star X's SHA, which is 45 degrees west of the first point of Aries. So 45 degrees GHA plus 45 degrees SHA gives us a longitude of 90 degrees west for star X's GP. Okay, so all that just to demonstrate why, in order to get the longitude of a star's GP, you have to add the GHA of Aries for the GMT time the measurement was taken to the SHA of the star that you've measured. Now, if we pull up the almanac and enter the date for the 2024 spring equinox, which is March 22nd, 2024, we can look at the GHA for the first point of Aries at 12 noon GMT and see that it is indeed 0 degrees. Now it's 0 degrees 28.9 minutes, and the Earth rotates at a rate of half a degree every 2 minutes. So this is showing a little less than half of a degree, which is 30 minutes, which means that the first point of Aries was exactly over the prime meridian about a minute and 50 seconds or so earlier than 12 noon. So at about 11:58 and 10 seconds or something like that is when it crossed directly over the Greenwich or prime meridian. And we can see that 12 hours earlier at midnight or 12 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the GHA of Aries was almost exactly 180 degrees. Because, of course, at midnight, Greenwich, England, along with the prime meridian, would be facing directly away from the sun. So the GHA would be measured to be 180 degrees to the west of the prime meridian. Now, if we move forward in time a month and a half, the GHA of Aries should be about 45 degrees at 12 noon GMT. Now, I've already went ahead and figured out that if we moved forward a month and a half, the date would be May the 6th. So I'll enter that into the date select, and if we check the GHA of Aries at noon, we can see now that it is indeed about 45 degrees west of the prime meridian. And if we check 3 months from the equinox, which would be June 22nd, the GHA should be about 90 degrees at 12 noon GMT. And sure enough, pretty darn close. Now, just to show that the SHA of the stars don't change over the course of a year much, let's go back to the equinox, the date of the equinox, March 22nd. And we can look at the SHA of Acamar and see that it's 315 degrees, 12.5 minutes. And if we now skip forward 6 months, when the Earth is on the other side of the sun, say to September, we can see that the SHA in degrees for Acamar is still 315, and the minutes, which were 12.5 6 months ago, are now 11.6. So, less than a minute difference in 6 months. Okay, so back to the date of this measurement, which was 11/23/2024. Get data. So now we can input the degrees and minutes for the GHA of Aries at 0300 into the spreadsheet. And on this date, the GHA of Aries at 0300 GMT is 107 degrees, 34.9 minutes. Now, once we've done that, we can look up the sidereal hour angle, or SHA, for each of the stars we've measured. Okay, so the first star we measured was Difta. So we locate Difta in the list and input the degrees and minutes of Difta's SHA into the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet will convert the SHA from degrees and minutes to decimal degrees, then add that result to the GHA of Aries and do the necessary calculations to derive the longitude for that star's GP. So, Difta's SHA in degrees is 348, and minutes 47.2. Now we input the declination in degrees and minutes into the spreadsheet. The declination it directly corresponds to the degrees of latitude north or south of the equator. where that star's GP is located. And its declination is south 17 degrees, and for south declinations we add a minus sign in front of it, and 51 minutes. Now the next star we measured is Aldebaran, so we locate it in the list and input its SHA and declination. So it's SHA 290 degrees, 39.4 minutes. Declination is north 16 degrees, 33.7 minutes. Now the last star was Shedar. SHA is 349 degrees, 30.9 minutes, and its declination is north 56 degrees, 40.7 minutes. Okay, we're done with the almanac. Next, I'll pull up Google Earth and start dropping pins at the calculated coordinates for the GP of each star. So first is Difta. We'll go ahead and name it. Longitude of Difta's GP is 96.368 degrees west, and its latitude is 17.85 degrees south. Okay, now if we zoom in on Difta's GP location, we can pull up the measuring tool, make sure it's set to the circle measure option, and that the radius distance is set to display in nautical miles. Now we'll click as close to the pin as we can get, and we'll expand the radius of the circle to match the distance in nautical miles that the spreadsheet calculated for us. So we'll go with 2,928 nautical miles, this one. Now I'll save that circle on the map. Alright, and next is Aldebaran. We'll label that. Longitude of Aldebaran's GP is 38.238 degrees west, and its latitude is 16.561 north. Now we'll zoom in on its GP and expand the circle's radius out to 2,442.4 nautical miles. And then we'll save that circle. And finally, we drop a pin at Shadar's GP. Label it. Longitude is 97.096 west. And its latitude is 56.678 north. Drop that. And expand its circle out to a radius of 1,823.7 nautical miles. We'll save that to the map. Now the center of our fix is the center of that triangle formed by the 3 intersecting circles. This triangle is known as the cocked hat in celestial navigation lingo. Now I will reveal the actual location we were trying to get a fix on, which is the Vehicle Assembly Building at Cape Canaveral, Florida. And if we change the measuring tool to the line option and measure the distance in nautical miles from the center of our fix to the actual location from which the star angles were measured, we get a distance of less than 10 nautical miles. So pretty darn close. I'd say the spreadsheet works pretty well. Okay, that's it. If you'd like to download the spreadsheet, the link to it will be in the description. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time.